You're listening to Eating for Eden, episode 21. When it comes to doing something about climate change, your food choices matter. Thanks for tuning in to Eating for Eden, a podcast that takes a food-first approach to climate action. I'm your host, Jessica J. Schroeder, and I am passionate about food that tastes good and does good. I'll guide you with practical tips and help you thoroughly enjoy your food along the way. Thanks for tuning in to Eating for Eden. For anyone who's been around for a while, this week I'm going to try something new. This episode is going to focus on a couple of recipes, which I will link to in the show notes. Here in this episode, I'll talk through the recipes, give some explanation of the process, and provide step-by-step instructions. My hope is that it will give you additional context and confidence for giving the recipes a shot on your own. Don't worry about writing anything down. The exact ingredients and amounts will be in the recipes linked in the show notes. Just listen in and enjoy. If, after giving this a listen, you like what you hear, please let me know. As I try out different episode formats and content types, I'm curious to know what is landing and resonating most with you, my dear listener. Send any feedback or questions that you have to edenandme@substack.com. Okay, let's dive in. The last couple of episodes have focused in on tofu and soy more generally. In episode 19, I provided an overview of tofu, what it is and how to use it in cooking. And episode 20 featured an interview with Dr. Matthew Nagra, who led us through myth busting and the scientific consensus on consuming soy foods. If you missed either of those, I highly recommend going back and giving them a listen. Today, I want to walk through two recipes where tofu is used in place of dairy, cheese to be exact. I teach you how to make a tofu feta and a tofu cashew ricotta. If you're new to working with tofu, especially to steps like pressing tofu, you're in the right place. My goal is for you to walk away feeling inspired and equipped to make your own plant-based cheese swaps right at home. So without further ado, on to our first recipe, tofu feta. I don't think it's an overstatement to say that this recipe has changed my life. Since I eat almost exclusively whole food plant-based, and dairy used to be one of my favorite types of food, this feta has become a regular in my kitchen. Whether I'm putting this on top of crusty sourdough bread with fresh tomatoes in the late summer, and balsamic, of course, or stirring it into bowls of steaming pasta midwinter, this fridge staple is something I make almost weekly. It comes together quickly and easily, and it lasts in the fridge for about a week. It also tastes delicious and is super versatile. There is a lot to love about this recipe. I recently brought it over to share with some foodie friends of mine, and my one friend exclaimed, "How does this smell so much like real feta?" I'll just let that speak for itself. Don't let the tofu part make you shy away from the recipe. If you're on the fence about tofu, give this recipe a try. It might just win you over. If you care about nutritional profile, this feta cheese, quote unquote, is rich in plant protein and good fats, so the polyunsaturated fats, as well as having some plant-based monounsaturated fats, plus beneficial soy isoflavones, a kind of phytonutrient that we talked about last week with Dr. Nagra. To get a bit nerdier, the fatty acid distribution in tofu is pretty great as well. As I continue to learn more about the benefits of polyunsaturated fats in particular, especially the massive benefits of swapping out saturated fat in favor of these polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs, it's splendid to find out that more than half of tofu's total fat comes from these coveted PUFAs. For every 3 ounces of firm tofu, the 4 grams of total fat break down into 2.5 grams of polyunsaturated fat. That's nearly 63%. And then 1 gram of mono, which makes about 25%. And then that small remainder, only 0.5 gram, is from saturated fat. That's a terrific breakdown. And what's more, there's a whopping 7 grams of protein in just 3 ounces of firm tofu, which is what I use here for the feta. On the flip side, actual feta, dairy feta, cheese has more fat than it has protein, and its fat content is more than 50% saturated. Turning to climate-related matters away from the nutrition, cheese at large has over 7 times the environmental impact of tofu when we consider each one's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. Taking just these few points into account, we can see clear benefits of tofu, both nutritionally and environmentally. But while nutrition and planetary impact aren't everything, this feta also tastes lovely. If I'm going to be suggesting meaningful swaps, they have to taste good too, and this does. It can be used anywhere tofu would be used: on salads, in pastas, on crusty bread, with dips, in Mediterranean bowls with rice, lentils, and fresh veg, on pizza, in sandwiches, even simply on crackers or with fruit as a simple snack. Okay, with that introduction given, now let's move on to the recipe itself. To make this tofu feta, you will need 14 ounces of firm tofu, pressed, and I'll get to that process in a minute, 2 teaspoons of either white or yellow miso paste, a 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice, or a combination of the two, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of nutritional yeast, and optional, you can add in fresh or dried herbs or spices such as oregano, black pepper, etc. Before a step-by-step walk through the recipe, let's talk about pressing tofu. Pressing tofu removes some of the water and can help achieve a firmer texture if desired. As you cook with tofu more and more, you'll get a feel for what you prefer in different applications. I like to press my firm tofu for about 5 to 15 minutes before making this feta. Since we're adding a marinade to it, it will soak some moisture back in, so it's nice to get some of the excess water out on the front end. To press tofu, start by laying out a clean cotton kitchen towel on the counter. Cut open your package of tofu over the kitchen sink. I do this by slicing through 3 of the 4 sides on the top of the wrapper with a paring knife, and then drain out the water. Take out the block of tofu, set it in the middle of your towel, wrap up the tofu nice and snug, and place something heavy on top to weigh it down. Now, you probably don't want something too heavy. For instance, a cast iron griddle will smash it, not press it. I usually opt for a plate and the mortar from my mortar and pestle. See what you have around your kitchen to give a try. You want it to be heavy enough to coax water out, but not so heavy that the tofu gets smashed out of shape. I will add here, you don't need any special kitchen gadget for this, like a quote, tofu press. Skip the extra gear and just use a plate and something moderately heavy. You might even get by with a pot or a pan. Also, I highly recommend using a kitchen towel over paper towels. Using paper towels is just so wasteful. As long as you have a clean cotton kitchen towel, you're good to go. I have a towel that I dedicate to using for tofu alone, so I'll let it dry once I press my tofu and set it aside in the kitchen. If I need it again before I do laundry that week, it's ready to go for another pressing. By the way, this method of pressing tofu is appropriate for any time you see a recipe call for pressed tofu. This is not specific to this recipe. It's a universal skill you can apply across the board. Next, I want to introduce 2 ingredients that you may or may not be familiar with: miso and nutritional yeast. Miso is a paste made from fermented soybeans. As far as typical uses, you're likely most familiar with its place in miso soup. Miso is salty, umami, and has what I call a taste like more quality. It can be used in many ways to add depth of flavor and plays an important role in making tofu and nut-based cheese swaps taste like cheese. Nutritional yeast, also referred to as nooch, is an essential utility player in the plant-based kitchen. This also has a cheesy, tastes like more quality. And now I'm wondering if that's just another way to describe umami. Anyway, nutritional yeast are tasty flakes of deactivated yeast similar to the strain used in baking and brewing, and it's an explosion of umami flavor. It's amazing on popcorn. I love that. And helps bring that distinct cheesy flavor to dairy-free swaps. Inherently providing its own combination of nutrients, nutritional yeast is also typically fortified additionally. particularly with B vitamins. So it's good for more than just its taste, and that itself would be enough. As for the apple cider vinegar and lemon juice, personally, I think that a blend is really tasty. At the same time, apple cider vinegar alone is the easiest way to go. Admittedly, I haven't tried using all lemon juice, but I bet it works just fine that way. I will say that I like the tang that apple cider vinegar brings to plant-based cheese swaps, such as the cream cheese recipe I linked to in episode 19, and which is available at edenandme.com. Apple cider vinegar is kind of a magical ingredient in providing that distinct tang that such dairy products are characterized by. All this to say, take whatever path you'd like with the acid, whether you make your decision from a taste standpoint, for the sake of ease, or simply with reference to what you do or do not have around your kitchen. Finally, if you want to get fancy and add fresh or dried herbs or spices, feel free to do so. I typically make mine plain and leave it that way so that I have the option of doctoring it up and using it however I want at the point of serving. For instance, I've even used this as for sweet applications on a whim, so leaving it plain has been a good choice for me. But if you're making it for a Greek feast and expect to use it all up, go ahead, just throw in the oregano, black pepper, whatever. Go nuts and enjoy it. Okay, with all that context in mind, let's make some tofu feta. Step number 1, start by pressing the tofu. Step 2, as the tofu is pressing, make the feta marinade. In a mixing bowl or directly in a 4-cup glass storage container, use a fork or whisk to break up the miso in the apple cider vinegar or lemon juice until fully incorporated. Add the salt and mix until dissolved. Then add the nutritional yeast and mix until incorporated. You want a nice, consistent mixture. Note, I like to use a mortar and pestle to break down my nutritional yeast into a powder so it mixes in really nicely, but you don't have to take that extra step. Step 3, crumble the pressed tofu into the bowl or container. Mix well with the marinade so the tofu pieces are evenly coated. Step 4, refrigerate the mixture. While this, quote, feta could theoretically be used right away, it's really best to let the flavors meld for at least a few hours before use. Consider making it even a full day in advance of using, because its flavors will be better on the second day and continue to get better as it sits. This will last in the fridge for up to a week. You may want to stir it every day or two if not using, though this is not strictly necessary. Water separation is natural. And note, the mixture will break down and turn more cohesive the longer it sits. As noted earlier, use this feta however you'd use traditional dairy feta. It really is so tasty. I hope you grab some firm tofu and give this a try soon. Now that we've covered one cheese swap, let's move on to the other one, equally versatile. Tofu cashew ricotta. Whether you use it for making a vegan lasagna, topping pizza, serving alongside scones, or simply eating with fresh fruit, this tofu ricotta cheese is a great staple to add to your plant-based repertoire. It can be used in both sweet and savory applications, as well as those down the middle in the more or less neutral zone. This can be used as is, but can also be made into fillings and sauces. Just like the tofu feta, use this ricotta as you would use a dairy ricotta cheese. To make this tofu cashew ricotta, you will need half a cup of cashews, soaked, 14 ounces of firm tofu, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice, 1 tablespoon of nutritional yeast, 1 teaspoon of salt, and that's for the base plain ricotta. Feel free to leave it there, or you can add flavor with spices. You can sweeten it or otherwise doctor it up as desired. You might add in garlic powder, white pepper, and cayenne for use in lasagna or a creamy pasta sauce. You can even jazz it up for sweet applications like crepes with maple syrup or honey. Vanilla and lemon zest are also fun additions. Okay, now for the play-by-play. Here's how the ricotta is made. Step 1. Start by soaking the cashews. Place the half a cup of cashews and a pinch of salt in a bowl, cover with filtered water, and let it sit for 4 to 8 hours. This can be done overnight if needed. Just be aware that cashews can get mushy from soaking for too long. Step 2, once soaked, drain the cashews. Add them to the bowl of a food processor and blitz them until broken down a bit. Step 3, drain the tofu and break it into a few pieces into the bowl of the food processor. Process it to break down the tofu and incorporate the cashews into a consistent mass. Step 4, add the apple cider vinegar or lemon juice, nutritional yeast, and salt. Process, pausing to scrape down the sides as needed until all is well incorporated. Step 5, from this point, you can either use it right away or scoop it all into a container to refrigerate. Anything not used immediately can be refrigerated for up to a week. Some water separation may occur and is natural. Simply stir it back in. Sound simple? Good. It is. Making cheese swaps couldn't be easier. While this ricotta recipe requires the special equipment of a food processor, the great news about the feta is that no special equipment is required. Whichever you decide to start with, I hope you'll give either one or both a try soon and find ways to share them with your friends as well. As a reminder, these recipes are linked in the show notes below. As I noted this at the start, I'm curious to hear what you think about this episode format. If you liked it, let me know. If not, I'd also like to hear that too. I want to offer a variety of great information while making it practical as well. And I certainly want to provide what is relevant and interesting for you, my listeners. If you have questions or topics you'd like me to address here on Eating for Eden, I'd love to hear from you. Send an email to edenandme@substack.com. Also, if you've been enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving a review. It's a great help for getting these important words out to others. And if you want recipes, check out edenandme.com, where you can find a variety of delicious, healthy recipes to bring what you're learning into the kitchen. Finally, become an email subscriber on Substack to have new podcast episodes delivered directly to your inbox. If you appreciate the work I'm doing and want to support the show, you'll also have the option of becoming a paid subscriber. That's all for now, friends. Until next time, be well. Thanks for listening to Eating for Eden. If you found this episode informative or inspiring, please consider sharing it with a friend. Climate change is an issue we all need to tackle together, so let's invite others to journey along with us as we continue the conversation and start taking action. Until next week, friends, take care.